Are you lonely? You should marry my mother. She is kind. The massive blue-furred beast's claws whistled past Will's ear as he threw himself sideways, rolling across the rocky ground. His makeshift spear lay 20 feet away, snapped in half during the creature's initial charge. Blood streamed from 3 parallel gashes across his chest, soaking through his torn work shirt. The predator's 6 eyes fixed on him, its maw opening to reveal rows of crystalline teeth that glinted like broken glass in the harsh light filtering through the canyon's rim. Will scrambled backward, his calloused hands searching desperately for anything. A rock, a stick, anything he could use as a weapon. The creature stalked forward, each step making the ground tremble. Its blue coat rippled with muscle as it prepared to pounce. Will had survived 18 months since the transport crash that stranded him on this world, but his luck was finally running out. Then a child's voice rang out from somewhere above. "Mama, the Skyman is going to die." The beast's head swiveled toward the sound, momentarily distracted. Will seized the moment, diving for a jagged piece of flint. As the predator turned back to him, he hurled the stone with all his strength. It struck one of the creature's central eyes with a wet pop. The beast roared, a sound like grinding stone that echoed off the canyon walls. "Use the thorns," the same young voice called out. "Behind you!" Will glanced back and saw a cluster of crimson spike plants growing from a crevice in the rock face. Each thorn was as long as his forearm and sharp as any blade he'd improvised during his months of survival. He grabbed one, yanking it free just as the wounded beast charged again, blood streaming from its ruined eye. The creature's weight slammed into him, driving him backward against the canyon wall. The thorn in his hands was all that stood between him and death. Will thrust upward with every ounce of desperate strength, feeling the spike pierce through the beast's thick hide, through muscle and sinew, until it found something vital. The predator's roar turned into a gurgle, then silence. Both Will and the dead creature crashed to the ground in a tangle of blue fur and human sweat. For long moments, Will lay there gasping, feeling the creature's warm blood soak into the earth beneath him. His ribs ached where the beast's paws had struck him, and his vision swam from blood loss. "Are you dead, Skyman?" The voice was closer now, directly above him. Will opened his eyes and looked up. On a ledge 15 feet above, 2 figures peered down at him. The smaller one was clearly a child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old by human standards, but with the distinctive blue-tinged skin of the canyon dwellers. The larger figure remained partially hidden behind an outcropping, only a glimpse of similar blue skin and what looked like elaborate scars visible. "Not dead yet," Will croaked, pushing himself up to a sitting position. The effort sent waves of pain through his chest. The child scrambled down the cliff face with remarkable agility, their movements reminding Will of the small lizards that lived in the canyon crevices. They wore simple clothing made from some kind of woven plant fiber, dyed in earth tones that would blend perfectly with the rocky landscape. "I am Joy," the child announced, crouching just out of arm's reach. "You fought well for a Skyman. Usually your kind die faster." "Thanks for the encouraging words," Will muttered, pressing his hand against the worst of his wounds. "And thank you for the tip about the thorns. That saved my life." Joy tilted their head, studying him with curious amber eyes. "Why do you hunt in Mother's territory without permission? The Blue Claws always kill lone hunters." "I wasn't hunting. I was being hunted." Will gestured to the dead beast. "This thing has been tracking me for 2 days. I was trying to get to higher ground when it cornered me here." "You have no pack," Joy observed. "No family, no tribe." It wasn't a question, but Will nodded anyway. "Just me. Have been since my transport crashed in the eastern desert." "Are you lonely?" The question was asked with startling directness, the way only a child could manage. Will paused in his attempt to clean his wounds. The question hit deeper than he expected. 18 months of solitary survival had hardened him in many ways, but the ache of isolation was a wound that never fully healed. As a technician back on Earth, he'd been used to working alone, fixing systems in quiet spaces. But this was different. This was being truly alone in a hostile world. "Sometimes," he admitted. Joy stood up suddenly, cupping their hands around their mouth to call up to the figure still hidden on the ledge. They spoke in rapid clicks and whistles, the canyon dweller's native tongue. Will had picked up some of it during his time here, enough to recognize that they were discussing him. The response from above was a series of sharp, negative-sounding clicks. Mother says you are trouble, Joy translated matter-of-factly. She says skymen bring death wherever they go. Your mother might be right, Will said, finally managing to get to his feet. His legs shook with exhaustion. But I'm not looking for trouble. I'm just trying to survive. More clicking from above, this time softer, almost hesitant. Mother says, pause, seeming to consider their words carefully. Mother says you fight with honor. The blue claw was twice your size, but you did not run until the end. Will looked up toward the ledge, trying to get a better look at Joy's mother, but she remained in shadow. Tell your mother I'm grateful for her observation and for your help. Joy translated, and this time the response was longer, more complex. As the conversation continued, Will noticed the child's expression growing more animated, almost excited. What's she saying? Will asked when the clicking finally stopped. She asked if you have territory, if you have anyone to tend your wounds when you are injured, if you have anyone to watch for enemies while you sleep. Joy's amber eyes were bright with some emotion Will couldn't identify. I told her no. You are alone. More conversation and clicks and whistles followed. Will found himself growing impatient, swaying on his feet from blood loss and exhaustion. He needed to find shelter and treat his wounds before infection set in. Finally, Joy turned back to him with a wide grin that revealed slightly pointed teeth. Mother says you may come to our shelter, just for tonight, until your wounds close. That's very kind of her, Will said, surprised. In his 18 months here, the canyon dwellers had been polite but distant. They traded with him occasionally, but had never offered hospitality. She also says you are stupid for hunting alone, Joy added cheerfully. But brave stupid? Not weak stupid. I'll take that as a compliment. As Joy began scrambling back up the cliff face, they called down, Are you lonely, Skyman? You should marry my mother. She is kind. The words hit Will like a physical blow. He stared up at the child, certain he had misheard. What did you just say? But Joy was already climbing higher, their small form moving with practiced ease over the rocky surface. Come, mother does not like to wait. Will stood alone beside the massive corpse, the child's words echoing in his mind. He shook his head, attributing the bizarre suggestion to either blood loss or a translation error. Gathering what remained of his improvised gear, he began the painful process of following Joy up the cliff. The climb was agony with his injuries, but Will had learned to push through pain during his months of survival. His technical background had taught him to approach problems systematically, analyzing routes, calculating stress points, finding solutions even when none seemed apparent. The canyon dwellers' natural agility made routes accessible to them that would be impossible for most humans. But Will had adapted, developing climbing skills that would have amazed his former colleagues back in the underground maintenance tunnels. The ledge opened onto a narrow trail that wound deeper into the canyon walls. Here, the red stone was carved with ancient symbols and worn smooth by countless generations of passage. The air smelled of mineral springs and the dried herbs that grew in the protected alcoves. Joy waited for him at several points along the trail, their expressions showing a mixture of impatience and concern as Will struggled to keep up. The child's casual mention of marriage seemed to have been forgotten, for which Will was grateful. The last thing he needed was to navigate the complex social customs of an alien culture while bleeding and exhausted. The trail ended at a wide natural amphitheater carved into the canyon wall. Water trickled down the red stone from hidden springs, creating small pools that reflected the fading light. Shelters were built into the rock face itself, not crude caves, but carefully constructed dwellings with woven screens and carved doorways. Mother's place, Joy announced, pointing to one of the larger shelters. For the first time, Will got a clear look at Joy's mother as she emerged from the shadowed entrance. She was tall for one of the canyon dwellers, nearly matching his own height, with the characteristic blue-tinged skin and elaborate scarification that marked her as an adult member of the tribe. Her hair was black as obsidian, braided with small bones and colored stones. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, a deep violet color he had never seen among her people, and filled with an intelligence that seemed to measure and catalog everything around her. She spoke in the clicking language, her voice carrying a musical quality that made the harsh consonants sound almost lyrical. Mother says welcome, Skyman Will, Joy translated. She asks how you know her name is Mira. Will blinked in confusion. I don't know her name. I never said. You called her Mira when you were climbing. When you slipped and cursed, you said, Mira, help me. Will felt heat rise in his cheeks. Mira is a word from my language. It means it's an expression, like asking for help from the spirits. Joy translated, and Mira's eyebrows rose slightly. She replied with what sounded like amusement in her voice. Mother says the spirits have brought you here, so perhaps they answered your prayer. She says you may call her Mira if you wish, since the spirits chose that name. The woman, Benin, Mira, gestured for Will to follow her into the shelter. Inside, the space was larger than it had appeared from outside, with carved alcoves holding various tools and supplies. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling, filling the air with a medicinal scent. A small fire burned in a carefully constructed hearth, its smoke drawn up through a natural chimney in the rock. Mira indicated a pile of soft hides near the fire, then disappeared into a back alcove. She returned with a collection of healing supplies, bandages woven from plant fibers, clay pots filled with salves, and a stone bowl of clean water. Mother is the best healer in 3 clans, Joy said proudly, settling cross-legged on the floor nearby. She learned from her grandmother, who learned from her grandmother's grandmother. Will allowed Mira to examine his wounds, trying not to flinch at her gentle but thorough inspection. Her hands were warm against the skin, and she worked with the confidence of someone who had treated many similar injuries. As she cleaned and dressed his wounds, she spoke quietly to Joy in their native tongue. She wants to know about your scars, Joy translated. The old ones. She says they tell a story. Will looked down at his arms and torso, marked with the accumulated damage of 18 months in hostile wilderness. Many were from his technical work before the crash. Burns from electrical accidents, cuts from sharp metal edges, the inevitable scrapes that came with maintaining complex systems in cramped spaces. Others were new, earned in this harsh world. Each one is a lesson in how not to die, he said simply. When this was translated, Mira's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. She replied, her fingers tracing one particularly prominent scar that ran from his shoulder to his elbow. She says this one is from claws, but not blue claw, something smaller, faster. Rock runners, Will confirmed. Pack of them cornered me in a narrow ravine about 6 months ago. I was trying to repair a water collection system I'd built when they attacked. And this? Joy pointed to a circular scar on his ribs. Spear thrust, another human actually. We were both going for the same salvage site from a crashed transport. Mira paused in her work, fixing him with those violet eyes. She asked a longer question, her tone serious. Mother wants to know if you killed the other Skyman. Will met her gaze steadily. Yes, he would have killed me otherwise. There was a long moment of silence as Mira considered this. Finally, she nodded and returned to tending his wounds. But Will noticed the subtle shift in her posture. Not fear, but increased wariness. Mother says survival requires hard choices, Joy said quietly. She says you wear your choices honestly, which is good. As Mira worked, Will found himself studying her face. The scarification was more complex than he had first realized. Not just random marks, but intricate patterns that seemed to tell a story. Some were clearly ceremonial, applied with careful artistry. Others looked like they might have been earned through combat or survival, similar to his own collection of scars. What do her scars mean? He asked Joy. The child looked uncertain, glancing at their mother. After a brief exchange in clicks, they replied, Some are for ceremonies, coming of age, bonding with the clan. Others are for difficult times. When father died, mother cut the grief marks herself. They remind her that pain can be survived. Will felt a pang of sympathy. He knew something about surviving loss. The crash that stranded him here had killed everyone else on his transport, including colleagues he'd worked with for years. I'm sorry about your father. Mira had understood the word father and replied directly to him in halting but clear English. He was good hunter, strong. Sickness took him when Joy was small. It was the first time she had spoken his language, and her accent made the familiar words sound exotic and musical. Will was impressed. Learning another species' language was no simple task. You speak English well, he said. Trade with Skymen requires words they understand, she replied, concentrating on the syllables. Some skymen are better than others for learning from. The implication was clear enough. Will wasn't the first human to survive long enough to interact with the canyon dwellers, but he might be among the few who had earned any measure of respect. Your English is better than my clicking, Will admitted, which earned him what was definitely a smile from Mira. Joy giggled. You click like a baby bird asking for food. Mother says your accent is terrible. My accent in your language makes me sound like a baby bird? Hungry baby bird, Joy corrected solemnly, which only made Will laugh despite his exhaustion. As the evening progressed, Will found himself relaxing for the first time in months. The shelter was warm and secure, the company was pleasant, and his wounds had been expertly treated. Mira prepared a meal from dried meat and some kind of grain that expanded when cooked, creating a hearty stew that filled his empty stomach. How long since you ate real food? Joy asked, watching him devour the meal. Define real food. If you mean cooked by someone else, it's been a very long time. Mira spoke up in her careful English. You live alone too long. Not good for skymen. Your people need community? Yes, community. We do better in groups. Will set down the empty bowl, feeling more human than he had in weeks. But finding the right group can be difficult. Why do you not return to Skymen's settlement? Joy asked. Mother says there are others of your kind 2 canyons north. Will had heard rumors of the settlement, but had avoided it deliberately. The humans there, we don't agree on how to survive in this world. They take what they want by force. I prefer to trade, to work with problems, rather than trying to dominate them. Mira nodded approvingly. This is why you are welcome here. You show respect. As the fire burned lower, Will felt exhaustion overtaking him. The events of the day, combined with his injuries and the first full meal he'd had in days, were taking their toll. He caught himself nodding off where he sat. You need sleep, Mira observed. There are sleeping furs in the back alcove. I don't want to impose. No impose, she said firmly. You are hurt. You are guest. Rest. Will didn't have the strength to argue further. The sleeping alcove was small but comfortable, filled with soft furs and woven blankets that smelled of the dried herbs hanging throughout the shelter. As he settled in, he could hear Mira and Joy talking quietly in their own language by the dying fire. He was nearly asleep when he heard Joy's voice again, speaking in English. Mother, he is lonely, like you are lonely. Mira's reply was too quiet to make out, but her tone was gently reproving. But he is kind, Joy continued, and brave. And he needs family. You need family too. Joy, enough. Let the Sky Man sleep. His name is Will, Mother, and I think he would be a good father for me. Better than Jorak or Tem or the others who bring you hunting gifts you do not want. Will felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. He was definitely not supposed to be hearing this conversation. But Mira's next words, spoken in a whisper he had to strain to catch, made his heart skip a beat. Perhaps. But such things cannot be decided by children, little one, even very wise children. Will lay awake long after their voices faded, staring up at the carved ceiling and wondering what he had walked into. The child's earlier words echoed in his mind. Are you lonely? You should marry my mother. She is kind. At the time, he had dismissed it as a child's innocent misunderstanding of adult relationships. Now he wasn't so sure. The canyon dwellers had different social structures than humans, but the concepts of loneliness and companionship seemed to translate well enough. And if he was being completely honest with himself, the idea wasn't entirely unwelcome. Mira was intelligent, skilled, and undeniably attractive, despite the obvious differences between their species. More importantly, she had shown him kindness when she had no obligation to do so. In a world where survival was everything, that kind of compassion was rarer than the precious metals he used to repair in his former life. But marriage? The idea was so far outside his experience that he couldn't even begin to consider the practical implications. Different species, different cultures, different languages. The obstacles seemed insurmountable. He was still wrestling with these thoughts when sleep finally claimed him. Will woke before dawn to the sound of movement outside the shelter. His wounds ached, but the sharp pain had faded to a manageable throb. The healing salves Mira had used were clearly effective. He emerged from the sleeping alcove to find Mira already awake, tending the fire and preparing what looked like breakfast. She looked up as he appeared, her violet eyes assessing his condition. Better? She asked in English. Much better. Thank you. He stretched carefully, testing his range of motion. Your healing skills are impressive. Necessary skill for survival, she replied pragmatically. Many injuries in canyon life. Joy was still asleep in another alcove, curled up in a nest of furs like a small animal. Will found himself wondering about the child's parentage. They showed characteristics of both the canyon dwellers and something else. The blue skin was lighter than most of the tribe, and the bone structure of the face was subtly different. Joy is, he began, then stopped, realizing the question might be inappropriate. Mixed blood, Mira said calmly, apparently reading his thoughts. Father was like you, Skyman. Will felt a jolt of surprise. Human? Yes, he came here wounded, like you. Stayed to heal, stayed longer to learn our ways. We bonded, made joy. Her expression grew distant. He tried to return to Skymen's settlement when sickness came, thought their healing might be stronger. He was wrong. I'm sorry, Will said, meaning it. That must have been difficult for both of you. Joy was very young, does not remember much of father, but she paused, seeming to consider her words. Joy dreams of having Skyman father again. This is why the questions yesterday. Will felt heat rise in his cheeks. Mira, I want you to know that I don't expect, what Joy said about marriage. I understand that was just a child's wish, Mira finished gently. Yes, but not foolish wish. She stood up from the fire, moving closer to where Will sat. In the dim light of dawn, her scarred blue skin seemed to glow with an inner light. She was beautiful in a way that was entirely alien, yet somehow familiar. You have been alone long time, she continued. This is not good for your kind. Not good for any kind. Humans are not meant for solitary life. No, Will admitted, we're not, but I've learned to manage. Managing is not same as living, Mira said, echoing a sentiment he had wrestled with many times during his months of survival. Before he could respond, Joy stirred in their sleeping alcove, mumbling something in the clicking language. Mira moved away from Will, returning to her morning preparations as the child woke up. Good morning, Skyman Will, Joy chirped, bouncing up with the irrepressible energy of youth. Are you feeling better? Did Mother's healing work well? Very well, Will confirmed. Your mother has skilled hands. Joy grinned and launched into a rapid conversation with Mira in their native tongue. Will caught a few words he recognized, something about hunting and weather and what sounded like clan names. Mother says the blue claw you killed yesterday was a rogue, Joy translated. It had been terrorizing the hunting grounds for many days. The clan elders will be pleased it is dead. I was mostly just trying not to become its dinner, Will said dryly. But you succeeded, and now the hunting trails are safer. Mother says this is a good deed that should be rewarded. Mira spoke again, her tone becoming more serious. She says clan elders want to meet you, to thank you for killing the rogue, and to, Joy paused, looking uncertain, to discuss your future. My future? More rapid clicking from Mira, with Joy occasionally asking what sounded like clarifying questions. The elders know you have been living alone in their territory for many seasons, Joy finally explained. They have watched you, seen that you respect the old boundaries, that you trade fairly, that you do not waste or destroy. They think perhaps it is time to make your status official. Will felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. What would that mean exactly? It means, Mira said in careful English, that you would no longer be guest in Canyon. You would be member of clan. The implications hit Will like a physical blow. He had dreamed of this possibility, but never dared hope it might actually happen. Full membership in a clan would mean security, community, belonging, all the things he had lost when the transport crashed. But, he said slowly, membership usually requires certain commitments, doesn't it? Marriage bonds, family responsibilities, that sort of thing. Mira's violet eyes met his directly. Usually, yes. Single adults are rare in clan structure. Community requires partnerships, shared responsibility. Joy bounced excitedly. This is perfect. You can marry Mother, and then you will be my father, and we will all be a proper family. Joy, Mira said sharply, but Will could see she wasn't entirely displeased by the child's enthusiasm. It's not that simple, Will said, though even as he spoke the words, he wondered if perhaps it could be. Marriage between different species, there would be challenges. Father was Skyman, Joy pointed out with irrefutable logic. I am proof that the Skymen and canyon dwellers can make family together. Will looked at Mira, trying to read her expression. What do you think about the elder's offer, and about... He gestured vaguely at the space between them. I think, Mira said carefully, that loneliness is a wound that heals poorly when left untreated. I think that survival requires more than just avoiding death. It requires reasons to live. I think that Joy needs father figure, and that I have been alone long enough to forget what partnership feels like. She paused, then added with what might have been a smile, and I think that if you can kill a blue claw with nothing but a thorn and determination, you might be strong enough to handle marriage to a canyon dweller woman. Will felt his heart racing. Are you actually suggesting that we consider this? Really consider it. I am suggesting, Mira said, moving closer to him again, that when the elders come this morning, we tell them that Skyman Will has found his place in the clan, with family who accepts him. Joy let out a whoop of joy that probably woke half the settlement. They launched themselves at both adults, wrapping their arms around them and chattering excitedly in a mixture of English and clicking. This is wonderful. We will be the best family ever. Will, you can teach me to build things like Skymen, and Mother can teach you to heal like canyon dwellers. And I can teach you both to climb like me. Over the child's head, Will met Mira's eyes. There was warmth there and something that might have been affection, but also a practical calculation that he recognized from his own survival decisions. This won't be easy, he warned. We barely know each other. Different cultures, different languages, different ways of thinking about the world. Nothing about survival is easy, Mira replied, but perhaps surviving together will be easier than surviving alone. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Mira quickly moved to the entrance of the shelter, speaking in quick clicks to whoever was outside. The response was formal and ceremonial sounding. The elders are coming, she told Will. They wish to speak with you about yesterday's events. Will stood up, his wounded muscles protesting the movement. Any advice for impressing canyon dweller elders? Be honest, be respectful, and remember that strength comes in many forms, not just physical. 3 figures appeared at the entrance to the shelter. All were clearly elders, their blue skin marked with the elaborate scarification of age and wisdom. The central figure was a woman who looked ancient even by canyon dweller standards, her hair white as bone and her violet eyes sharp as obsidian blades. She spoke in the formal clicking language, her words carrying clear authority. Mira replied with equal formality, gesturing toward Will as she spoke. Elder Senna wishes to know if the Skyman will understand the responsibilities that come with clan membership, Joy translated in a whisper. Will stepped forward, offering the respectful bow he had learned from watching other interactions with the elders. I understand that membership requires contribution to the community's welfare, defense of clan territory and clan members, and adherence to the traditional laws and customs. When this was translated, the elders exchanged glances. The second elder, a tall male with intricate geometric scars covering his arms, spoke next. He asks if you understand that membership also requires family bonds, Joy continued translating. That lone adults disrupt the social balance. Will felt his palms sweating despite the cool morning air. This was it, the moment when his future would be decided. I understand, and I believe I have found a family willing to accept me. He looked at Mira, who nodded slightly. She stepped forward and spoke to the elders in formal tones, her words punctuated by gestures toward both Will and Joy. The third elder, younger than the others but still bearing the marks of significant age, asked what sounded like a question. She wants to know if you understand what bonding with Mira would mean, Joy said, their voice unusually serious. Not just for you, but for Joy as well. You would be responsible for child rearing, education, protection. Will knelt down so he was at eye level with Joy. I understand, and I want you to know that I would never take that responsibility lightly. Being a father it would be an honor. Joy's eyes lit up, but they maintained the formal tone appropriate for the occasion. And Mother? What does bonding mean for her? Will stood and faced Mira directly. It means she would have a partner who respects her strength, her knowledge, her independence. Someone who would share the burdens of survival instead of adding to them. Someone who would, he paused, searching for the right words. Someone who would cherish her kindness without taking advantage of it. Mira's expression softened slightly, though she maintained her formal posture for the elder's benefit. Elder Senna spoke again, this time at greater length. Her tone suggested she was making some kind of pronouncement. She says, Joy translated, that the clan has observed Skyman Will for many seasons. They have seen him trade fairly, respect boundaries, kill only what is needed for survival, and show courage in the face of great danger. Yesterday's defeat of the rogue Blue Claw proves that he can protect clan territory. The elder continued, and Joy's translation became more excited. She says that if Mira the healer and Joy the clever both accept Will as family, then the clan will perform the bonding ceremony at the next full moon. He will become Will of the Canyon clan with all the rights and responsibilities that involves. Will felt dizzy with relief and excitement. And if we accept each other as family, what happens then? Mira stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell the herbal scents that clung to her hair and skin. Then we begin the most difficult and rewarding challenge of our lives, she said softly. We learn to be a family. The elders departed after a few more formal exchanges, leaving the three of them alone in the shelter. For a moment, nobody spoke, as if they were all trying to process the magnitude of what had just been decided. Finally, Joy broke the silence with a question that was pure childlike practicality. So when do I get to call you father? Will laughed, feeling lighter than he had in months. I suppose that's up to your mother. Mira considered this seriously. In our culture, the child chooses when to accept a new parent. The adults make the commitment, but the child decides when that commitment has been proven. Then I choose now, Joy declared. I have been waiting for a father for a long time, and I think Will be a good one. Just like that? Will asked, touched by the child's faith in him. Not just like that, Mira corrected gently. Choosing is easy. Proving the choice was correct takes time, but... She reached out and took his hand, her blue fingers intertwining with his human ones. I think we have time. Over the following days, Will began to understand what he had committed himself to. Integration into Canyon Dweller society was a complex process that went far beyond simply living in the same settlement. There were customs to learn, relationships to navigate, and practical skills that were essential for contributing to the community. Mira proved to be a patient teacher, guiding him through the intricate social protocols that govern daily life. He learned which elders to approach for different types of decisions, how to read the subtle scars that indicated an individual's role and status, and the proper forms of address for different occasions. Your pronunciation is improving, she told him one afternoon as they gathered medicinal herbs from the canyon walls. You no longer sound quite so much like a hungry baby bird. Only slightly hungry now, Will suggested, which earned him one of her rare full smiles. Joy had appointed themselves as Will's cultural interpreter, eagerly explaining the significance of various traditions and rituals. The child's enthusiasm was infectious, and Will found himself looking forward to each new lesson. Tomorrow we go to the memory caves, Joy announced over dinner. Every new clan member must learn the history of our people. Memory caves? Will asked. Where the story pictures are kept, Mira explained, the visual records of our people's history going back many generations. You must understand where we come from to truly belong with us. The memory caves turned out to be a vast network of chambers deep within the canyon walls, their surfaces covered with intricate paintings and carvings. Some depicted daily life, hunting, healing, celebration, while others showed great events like migrations, wars, and natural disasters. The cave keeper was an ancient male whose name, when pronounced correctly, sounded like wind whistling through stone. He guided Will through the galleries with reverent care, explaining the significance of each major panel. This shows the first contact with skymen, he said, indicating a painting that depicted tall, pale figures meeting with blue-skinned canyon dwellers. Many generations ago, some skymen were friendly, like you. Others, he pointed to another section showing conflict and destruction. The peaceful ones stayed, learned our ways. Their descendants still live among us. The others we drove away or killed. The cave keeper's violet eyes fixed on Will intently. Which kind are you? I hope I'm the first kind, Will replied honestly. I want to learn, to contribute, to belong. Time will show truth, the cave keeper said with finality. As they moved deeper into the caves, Will began to understand the complexity of canyon dweller society. These weren't simple nomads or primitive hunter-gatherers. They were a sophisticated people with rich traditions, complex governance structures, and a deep understanding of their environment that rivaled any technical manual he'd ever studied. Your people have achieved something remarkable, he told Mira, as they walked back toward the settlement. You've created a stable civilization that works in harmony with this harsh landscape. Survival requires adaptation, she replied. Those who cannot adapt do not survive to pass on their genes or their knowledge. Is that why the clan is willing to accept me? Because I've proven I can adapt? Mira stopped walking and turned to face him. The clan accepts you because you show respect. But She paused as if choosing her words carefully. I choose you because you make me remember what it feels like to hope for something beyond mere survival. The words hit Will with unexpected force. He had been so focused on the practical aspects of integration, learning customs, proving his worth, gaining acceptance, that he had almost forgotten the personal dimension of what they were building together. Mira, he said softly, reaching out to touch her scarred cheek. I want you to know that this isn't just about finding security or belonging for me. These past few days, watching you with awe, learning from you, seeing your strength and wisdom, I'm beginning to understand what your culture means when it talks about bonding. She leaned into his touch, her violet eyes closing briefly. Bonding is not just practical arrangement, not just survival partnership. It is, she struggled for the English words, it is choosing to make your joy and pain become shared, to make your future become our future. Is that what you want? Will asked, truly? Instead of answering with words, Mira stepped closer and kissed him. Her lips were warm and soft, and she tasted like the medicinal herbs she worked with daily. When they broke apart, her eyes were bright with something that looked like happiness. I want to build a life with you, she said simply. Not just survive together, but live together. Create something beautiful in this harsh world. The full moon ceremony took place in the central amphitheaters of the settlement, with the entire clan gathered to witness the formal bonding. Will had spent days learning the ritual responses and traditional vows, with Joy serving as his enthusiastic coach. Remember, when Elder Senna asks about your commitment to the clan, you must use the formal pronunciation, Joy reminded him for the 100th time. And when you speak the bonding words to Mother, look directly into her eyes. It shows sincerity. Will was more nervous than he had been facing the Blue Claw predator. Combat was something he could analyze, break down into components, solve like a technical problem. This was entirely new territory. What if I make a mistake? What if my pronunciation is so bad that I accidentally promise to marry the whole clan or something? Joy giggled. Then Mother will have to share you, and I think she would not like that very much. Mira appeared from the preparation alcove wearing ceremonial robes decorated with intricate beadwork and the ritual scars of bonding. She was beautiful in a way that made Will's chest tighten with emotion. Ready? She asked. Though Will could see, she was as nervous as he was. As ready as someone can be for promising to spend their life with someone they've known for 2 weeks, Will replied. In our culture, bonding is about potential, not certainty, Mira reminded him. We promise to discover who we can become together. The ceremony itself was both more complex and more moving than Will had expected. The clan elders spoke of the ancient traditions that bound their people together, of the responsibilities and privileges of family, and of the hope that each new bonding brought for future generations. When it came time for the personal vows, Will found that his nervousness faded away. Looking into Mira's violet eyes, speaking in her people's ancient language, he made promises that came from deeper than conscious thought. He promised to protect her and Joy with his life. He promised to learn the ways of her people and pass them on to future generations. He promised to share not just the burdens of survival, but the joys of living. And finally, in a vow that wasn't part of the traditional ceremony, but felt necessary, he promised to love her not despite their differences, but because of the strength those differences would bring to their union. Mira's vows were equally moving, spoken in a mixture of her language and his. She promised to teach him the deep wisdom of her people, to stand beside him in times of trial, and to help him find his place not just in the clan, but in the greater tapestry of life on this world. When Elder Senna declares them bonded, the clan celebration was joyous and infectious. There was singing and dancing, feasting on special foods brought out only for significant ceremonies, and the telling of stories that went long into the night. But the moment that mattered most to Will came when Joy approached them near the end of the celebration. The child's usual exuberance was tempered with something more serious, a recognition of the significance of what had just taken place. Will of the Canyon clan, Joy said formally, using his new name for the first time. I choose to call you father now. Will you accept this honor? Will knelt down to Joy's eye level, feeling tears he hadn't expected stinging his eyes. I accept, with gratitude and humility. I will try to be worthy of your trust. Joy grinned and threw their arms around him in a fierce hug. I knew you would be perfect for our family. Over Joy's head, Will met Mira's eyes. She was smiling, tears gleaming on her scarred cheeks. So, she said softly, now we begin the real adventure. The months that followed brought challenges Will had never anticipated. Learning to live as part of a family after months of solitude required constant adjustment and compromise. There were moments of friction as they navigated the complex dynamics of their unusual household. Will had to learn not just the canyon dwellers' language and customs, but also how to be a father to a child who was old enough to remember their birth father and who had strong opinions about everything. Joy was intelligent and curious, but also willful and occasionally manipulative in the way that bright children often are. You cannot make me practice combat drills, Joy declared one afternoon, crossing their arms defiantly. My real father never made me do boring things. Your real father is dead, Will replied bluntly, immediately regretting the harshness of his words when he saw Joy flinch. I'm sorry, that was cruel, but I'm your father now, and part of being a father means making sure you can defend yourself. You are not my real father, Joy shouted, tears streaming down their blue cheeks. You are just the sky man who married Mother. The words stung more than Will cared to admit. He looked to Mira for support, but she was watching the exchange with careful neutrality. You're right, Will said finally. I'm not your birth father, but I am the father who is here now, who cares about your safety and your future. And that means sometimes I have to make decisions you don't like. Joy glared at him for a long moment, then stomped off toward the settlement's climbing walls. Will started to follow, but Mira caught his arm. Let them cool down, she advised. Joy is testing boundaries. All children do this with new parents. How do I know if I'm handling it right? Will asked, feeling out of his depth. You worry about their feelings even when they hurt yours, Mira observed. That is a good sign. An hour later, Joy returned, subdued and slightly ashamed. I am sorry for saying you are not my real father, they said quietly. You are real. You are here. That makes you real father. And I'm sorry for being harsh about your birth father, Will replied. I know he was important to you, and I don't want to replace those memories. Can I have two fathers? Joy asked with the practical directness of childhood. One who is gone, but still loved, and one who is here and also loved. Will felt his throat tighten with emotion. I think that would be perfect. Mira's challenges were different but equally complex. She was used to making all decisions for herself and Joy, and sharing that responsibility required trust that didn't come easily after years of self-reliance. You changed the water filters without consulting me, she said one morning, her tone carefully neutral. Will looked up from his breakfast, confused. He had been working on improving their water collection system, applying his technical knowledge to make it more efficient. They needed changing. I had time, so I did it. Is that a problem? The problem is not the task, Mira explained patiently. The problem is that you made a decision about our shared resources without discussion. In Canyon culture, such decisions are made together. I was trying to be helpful, Willow said, feeling defensive. I know, but helpfulness without communication can feel like, she searched for the English word, like taking over, like my judgment is not trusted. Will set down his bowl, giving her his full attention. I'm sorry, I didn't think about the cultural implications. How should I have handled it? Ask first. The filters need changing. Should I do it now or would you prefer to wait? Small question, but it shows respect for partnership. These conversations happened regularly as they learned to navigate their new reality. Some were more difficult than others, especially when they touched on deeper issues of autonomy, tradition, and the fundamental differences in how their respective cultures approach relationships. Sometimes I feel like I am losing myself, Mira confided one evening as they sat together watching the sunset paint the canyon walls crimson. Becoming Will's bonded instead of just Mira. That's not what I want, Will said immediately. I fell in love with Mira the healer, Mira the fierce, Mira who saved my life. I don't want you to become someone else for me. But bonding changes people, Mira replied. It is supposed to. Two separate individuals become something new together. The question is whether that new thing is better or worse than what we were apart. Will considered this seriously, his technical mind approaching the problem analytically. What would make it better? Growth that makes us stronger, not weaker. Partnership that expands our possibilities, not limits them. Love that enhances who we are, not replaces who we were. And what would make it worse? Fear that makes us smaller. Dependency that weakens our individual strength. Compromises that sacrifice essential parts of ourselves. It was a conversation they returned to many times over the months, refining their understanding of what they wanted their relationship to become. Gradually, they developed their own unique approach to partnership, one that honored both their individual strengths and their shared goals. Will continued to work on technical projects, maintaining the independence that was essential to his sense of self. But he also learned to coordinate these projects with Mira's healing work, timing his absences to coincide with her busiest periods at the clan's medical center. Mira maintained her role as the settlement's primary healer, but she began teaching Will her skills, creating a partnership that made their household more valuable to the clan. His knowledge of anatomy and systematic approach to problem solving, combined with her understanding of local medicinal plants, led to new treatment approaches that benefited everyone. Joy thrived under the attention of two devoted parents, but also learned to navigate the different expectations and teaching styles each brought to their upbringing. From Will, they learned technical skills, logical thinking, and what he called Skyman pragmatism. From Mira, they learned the healing arts, cultural traditions, and the subtle social skills that were essential for clan life. I am lucky, Joy announced one day with the profound seriousness that children sometimes display. Most children have to learn from one parent or two similar parents. I get to learn from a healer mother and a builder father who come from different worlds. Does that make things confusing? Will asked. Sometimes, Joy admitted, when mother says one thing and you say something different. But mostly it makes things interesting, and I think it will make me stronger when I am grown. The real test of their family bond came during Joy's first serious illness. It started as what seemed like a minor respiratory infection, common enough among young canyon dwellers during the harsh winter months. But instead of improving, Joy's condition worsened rapidly. It's not responding to traditional treatments, Mira said, her voice tight with worry as she watched Joy sleep fitfully. The fever is too high, and the breathing problems are getting worse. Will felt helpless as he watched the child who had become so precious to him struggle for each breath. What about combining your treatments with some human medical knowledge? I learned field medicine during my technical training. What do you know that might help? Will examined Joy carefully, noting symptoms that seemed familiar from his basic medical training. This reminds me of something we called acute respiratory syndrome. It's not just an infection, it's an inflammatory response that can be triggered by infection. How do Skymen treat this? We use anti-inflammatory compounds, but I don't know if human treatments would be safe for someone with canyon dweller physiology. Mira's violet eyes were bright with tears, but her voice was steady. If we do nothing, Joy may die. If we try human treatments, they may die from the cure instead of the disease. As healer and as mother, what do you think we should do? The weight of the decision was crushing. Will looked down at Joy's flushed face, remembering the child's excitement when they had declared him their father. The trust in those amber eyes, the joy they had brought to his life. We start with the safest human treatments first, he said finally. Respiratory support, careful hydration, and if those don't work, we consider more aggressive interventions. They worked together through 3 days and nights, combining Mira's herbal knowledge with Will's understanding of human medicine. The clan elders watched anxiously, some clearly wondering if the Skyman's strange treatments might do more harm than good. On the fourth morning, Joy's fever finally broke, Their breathing eased, color returned to their blue cheeks, and they opened their eyes to ask for water in a voice that was weak but clear. I told you Mother's healing was the best, Joy whispered to Will, but your Skyman medicine is pretty good too. Will felt tears he hadn't even realized he was holding back stream down his face. We make a good team, your mother and I. The best team, Joy agreed, then fell into the first peaceful sleep they'd had in days. Mira collapsed into Will's arms, exhaustion and relief overwhelming her usual composure. I was so afraid, she whispered, so afraid of losing them. So was I, Will admitted. I didn't realize until this moment how completely they've become my child. Not just your child that I care for, but my child that I would die to protect. That is what makes you truly their father, Mira said softly. Not the bonding ceremony, not the formal adoption, the willingness to risk everything for their welfare. The successful treatment of Joy's illness marked a turning point in Will's integration into clan society. Word spread quickly through the settlement that the Skyman's knowledge had helped save a child's life. The combination of his medical insights with Mira's healing skills was seen as a powerful asset to the community. Elder Senna approached them a few days later with a proposal. The clan council has discussed your unique partnership, she said in her formal way. We believe there is value in creating a new position, a healing partnership that combines traditional canyon dweller medicine with Skyman knowledge. What would that involve? Mira asked. You would become the official healers, not just for our clan, but for the entire Canyon Alliance. 3 clans working together, with you as the central medical authority. It would mean greater responsibility, but also greater influence and resources. Will looked at Mira, trying to read her expression. This was clearly a significant honor, but it would also mean major changes to their life. The Alliance clans include more than 5,000 individuals, Mira said slowly. That level of responsibility would require assistance, training programs, supply networks, all of which would be provided, Elder Senna assured her. This is not a burden we would place on you without support. What do you think? Will asked Mira quietly. I think, she replied, that this is an opportunity to make our partnership into something that serves a greater purpose. To prove that cooperation between our peoples can create something stronger than either could achieve alone. Then we accept, Will said, speaking for both of them with a confidence that felt natural now. The ceremony that formally invested them with their new authority took place on the spring equinox, with representatives from all 3 Alliance clans in attendance. Will found himself standing before several hundred canyon dwellers, many of whom had traveled great distances to witness the unprecedented appointment of a Skyman to a position of traditional authority. Will of the Canyon clan, Elder Senna intoned in the formal language, do you swear to use your knowledge in service of all the Alliance clans, to respect the ancient wisdom of our healers, and to train others in the skills you have learned? I swear, Will replied in careful canyon dweller pronunciation, his words carrying across the amphitheater. Mira bonded to Will, the elder continued. Do you swear to share the knowledge of generations of healers, to guide your partner in the proper use of traditional medicines, and to ensure that new methods serve the people rather than replacing honored customs? I swear, Mira replied, her voice strong and clear. Then by the authority of the Alliance Council, we name you both Chief Healers of the Canyon Alliance. May your partnership bring health and wisdom to all our people. The celebration that followed was the largest Will had ever seen, with representatives from 3 clans sharing food, stories, and traditions long into the night. But the moment that mattered most to him came when Joy, now fully recovered and bursting with energy, stood up to address the gathering. I want to tell everyone about my parents, Joy announced with the fearless confidence of childhood. My father Will was lonely when he came to us, and my mother Mira was lonely too after my first father died. But they found each other, and they found me, and we became a family. And now their family love has grown big enough to help heal all the Alliance clans. The crowd's response was warm and approving, but Will was most touched by the pride in Mira's eyes as she watched their child speak. Our family has given me more than I ever dreamed possible, he told her quietly as the celebration continued around them. It has given me hope, Mira replied. For the first time since Vaughn died, I can imagine a future that includes joy, not just survival. In the months that followed, Will and Mira established medical centers in each of the Alliance clan territories, training local assistants in the combined healing techniques they had developed. The work was challenging and rewarding, requiring them to travel extensively and adapt their methods to different environments and situations. Joy often accompanied them on these trips, serving as a cultural interpreter and showing remarkable aptitude for the healing arts. The child's mixed heritage made them uniquely valuable as a bridge between different communities, and they clearly relished the responsibility. "When I am grown," Joy announced one evening as they camped under the alien stars, "I want to expand our healing network even further, maybe to the mountain clans or even to other Skyman settlements." "That's a noble goal," Will replied. "But remember that healing is about more than just medical techniques. It's about understanding people, earning trust, and building relationships." "Like you did with Mother and me," Joy said with a grin. "Exactly like that." As Will lay beside Mira that night, listening to her quiet breathing and Joy's soft murmurs in sleep, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. 18 months ago, he had been a man running from a crashed transport, surviving each day through skill and determination, but with no real hope for the future. Now he was part of something larger than himself, a family, a community, a mission that gave meaning to every day. The loneliness that had driven him into exile seemed like a distant memory, replaced by bonds so strong he could hardly imagine life without them. "Are you awake?" Mira whispered in the darkness. "Just thinking," Will replied softly. "About what?" "About how a child's simple question changed everything. Are you lonely? You should marry my mother. She is kind." Mira chuckled quietly. Joy has always been direct about important things. "The most important question I've ever been asked," Will said, turning to face her in the dim starlight, "and the best advice I've ever received. Even though marrying me brought you more responsibility and complications than you ever bargained for." "Especially because of that," Will replied, kissing her softly. "A life worth living is supposed to be complicated. It's supposed to challenge you and change you and make you into someone better than you were before." "And have you become someone better?" Mira asked. Will considered the question seriously. The man who had fought the blue claw predator that first day had been skilled and determined, but fundamentally alone. He had survived through individual strength and cunning, but he had been incomplete in ways he hadn't even recognized. Now he was part of a network of relationships that extended far beyond his immediate family. He was a father who helped shape a child's future, a partner who supported and was supported by a remarkable woman, a healer whose work benefited entire communities, and a bridge between different peoples and cultures. "I've become someone who belongs," he said finally. "Someone who has a place in the world that's uniquely mine, but also connects me to something larger than myself. That is the greatest healing of all," Mira said softly, "the healing of loneliness." They were interrupted by a soft rustling as Joy shifted in their sleep, murmuring something that sounded like contentment. Both parents smiled in the darkness, their hearts full of the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong. The years that followed brought their share of challenges and changes. The alliance grew to include additional clans, each bringing new medical challenges and cultural complexities to navigate. Will and Mira's healing centers became renowned throughout the region, attracting patients and students from distant territories. Joy grew into adolescence with the confidence of someone who had never doubted their place in the world. They excelled in both healing arts and technical skills, showing promise as a future leader who could unite different communities through their mixed heritage and broad education. "I want to establish a school," Joy announced on their 15th birthday, now tall enough to look Will directly in the eyes. "A place where young people from different clans and even different species can learn together. Medicine, engineering, diplomacy, survival skills, everything they need to build bridges instead of walls." "That's an ambitious dream," Mira observed, though her tone suggested approval rather than discouragement. "All the best dreams are ambitious," Joy replied, with the matter-of-fact confidence that had characterized them since childhood. "You two taught me that. You dreamed of a family when you were both alone, and look what happened." Will felt a surge of pride watching their child articulate such a mature and hopeful vision for the future. "What would you need from us to make this school a reality?" "Your support, your knowledge, and your connections with the Alliance leadership. But most importantly, your example."